The panel is on women's safety and health. I'd like to welcome our moderator, Chrις Tei, and our four panelists, Zainab, bint Younus, Tanille Geib, Vanessa Hammond, and Sonja Yli-Kahila. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's been an amazing afternoon. I want to take a second and thank the organizers of this. Really been, to watch these women work has been amazing, right? It's kind of been all year, and seeing the heart and spirit they bring to things, it's the hope I've had all year, is seeing how they go at things, so it's pretty amazing. I'm Chrις Tei. I'm the Executive Director of the Rainbow Health Cooperative. I'm also a newcomer. My parents brought me here, and I acknowledge our host, the Lekwungen-speaking people, whose traditional relationship with these lands and waters remains unbroken to this day. Rainbow Health Cooperative, BC's largest community-owned gender diversity organization. We support trans individuals and families through gender wellness programs and advocacy. Gender wellness is the combination of social policy and individual therapies that integrates gender in a holistic way in ourselves and in our communities. So why does that matter? 37,000 Canadian youth experience homelessness each year. 40% state a gender or sexual identity not supported in their family of origin. 50% cite abuse as a reason for leaving home. We drive by our tent cities and step around people living on our streets and wonder, what happened to them? They've already told us. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Gender wellness creates families of choice. I want to pass the mic down to the end and let each one of our panelists introduce themselves.
Hi everybody, my name is Sonja Yli-Kahila, and I'm a certified health coach as well as a nutritionist with a Master's of Science in Holistic Nutrition. I'm a founder of Rejuvenized Health Coaching and Nutrition, and I help people achieve their ideal health while gaining total body confidence so they can love the body and skin that they are in. And I do this by helping people break down barriers that have kept them stuck and have stopped them or slowed them down from achieving their health and wellness goals, and help them transform these barriers into healthy habits that last for the long term by really focusing on physical, mental, and emotional health. So I take a whole body holistic approach, whole body approach to health and well-being. And I incorporate nutrition and movement and lifestyle, but I really focus on helping people develop positive empowerment so that their thoughts move them towards their goals rather than create blockages that keep them stuck. And so as a result, change comes from a place of love, compassion, and curiosity, and this is what enables healthy habits to be formed or maintained for the long term.
Hello, I'm Tanille, and I am a third-generation settler of French heritage, and I grew up and was born in Treaty 7 territory, and the past 10 years have been in Coast Salish territories, and particularly the past 2 years in the Lekwungen-speaking people's territories. I'm a lover of humans. That's my situation. I really I'm honored to connect with people, and what that means, it changes throughout the years. I've been a yoga teacher, a birth doula, I'm a sexual health educator, curriculum developer, a community advocate, director, writer, producer, and filmmaker, also an erotic artist. So all of those things support me in connection, and I guess my current lens that I'm working through is through human sexuality, relationships, and more particularly in my new role at the Victoria Event Centre as their consent captain, and learning how to bring consent culture, empowerment, education, and then accountability into communities that I work in. So yeah, thank you for having me.
I am by far the oldest person in the room. My name's Vanessa, and I was born in England. My mother was Irish. It was kind of a displaced person birth. She couldn't get back to Ireland to give birth to me because of bombing. That's how long ago it was. So I've spent most of my life either being an Irish person in England or elsewhere. I've worked in 65 countries, or somebody who sounds English that isn't. Sorry, did that sound aggressive? Ireland was very poor after the war, mainly because of embargoes and all sorts of things that were put on by what is now the United Kingdom. I wanted pocket money. My dad said, get those hens to lay eggs. The only way to sell the eggs, first of all, I had to get rid of the foxes, which I did by yelling at them. The only way to sell the eggs was through the co-op, which came around once a week to sell bread and collect eggs. So I became an addict of cooperatives, which is actually how Chris and I met. There's something else here that oh yes, I'm a great-grandmother. My great-grandson is 9 and he's brilliant. He has more brains than all the rest of the family put together. Another little bit of relevant fact, when I'd done my degree, I was starting my master's and hating it, and I went home and said to my husband, I'm going to learn to fly, and he said, you are not to. How long do you think it took me to get up the flying school? And I got my license faster than anyone else, and then my commercial, my multi-engine, instrument IFR, etc. And I worked as a pilot in Northern Ontario for a while. That was a pile of fun. And he's still bitter about it. Oh well. But the co-op thing still stuck with me, and I've really spent the last, I don't know, 30 or 40 years helping people develop cooperatives. I think it's by nature easier for women to understand that when we have rights, we have responsibilities. And that's how co-ops work. Everyone is equal, we all have rights and responsibilities. I happen to think that our way of approaching health should be through our own rights and responsibilities and decisions, and at some stage I'm going to ask for a slide to be put up, but in the meantime, Zainab, I love your jacket.
So my name is Zainab bint Younus. I'm a writer and grassroots activist in the Muslim community who has been involved in community work for over a decade. I focus primarily on Muslim women's issues and women's issues in relation to society at large. So covering issues such as Muslim women in history, sex education, domestic violence, and Islamophobia. And I am very honored to be here amongst such esteemed panelists. Thank you.
I think as we've heard through the afternoon, the stories all are the same, but different,
Yes.
right? I think that's how we put it or something. I'm going to start with one of the second questions. And this does have to do with consent, because a lot of what's happening is non-consensual. So in the post-Me Too world, how do we now take action to develop a consensual culture for all of us to live in?
Well, I think we need to continue to spread the message of consent, and really, I believe we need to start with our children so that they grow up in a culture and an environment where consent and intimacy are intricately related, and that there's an understanding that without consent, it's not only disrespectful, but it's hurtful and harmful, and that respect really becomes a foundational value principle that all children learn. So that as they're growing up, in all their interactions with each other, they consider, is what I'm doing respectful of the other person? And then on the broader sense, I believe that we need to continue, obviously, the dialogue of consent in all our daily interactions with each other, through events and forums, but also I think that there's a place to be working with other local organizations and businesses that can also help promote this message, and specifically things like bars or nightclubs or restaurants, so that they're promoting the continued culture of really bringing up consent and consensual relationships and consensual activities and behaviors.
I I guess this is my question, but it's so like fast. I'm like, I think about this all the time. One thing that has been really coming up for the many different communities that I work with is as we raise this consent culture, I think there's like our mental capacities, like, okay, yeah, we're like on board with like, we don't want to harass or sexually assault people anymore, right? We're like, okay, we're getting there. But like all of our emotional and behavioral has not caught up. And like we're trying to shift thousands of years of violence in this way. And so I'm trying to come up with a place where as we like think about consent culture, like we have to go back to like the roots of like me as a settler, I don't even have the consent to be on these lands. And it starts from like what you're saying about our daily actions, as well as our intimate relationships and how we're going to bring connection and pleasure. And I think that one of the digestible things we can do is starting accountability processes for ourselves, number one, and listening to feedback. I like to call it feedback because calling out and calling in, there's like all this stuff that's going on in my communities that there's like a lot of lateral violence going on. And so I'm wondering in my personal practice and my professional practice, how do we take accountability for our behaviors, our actions, and then also have compassion for when we are going to make mistakes going forward as we go through this big, huge cultural shift in a consensual culture, and finding ways to grow together and find that, hopefully. So yeah, firstly looking at ourselves and our behaviors and how do we connect with the people of this land, and then being vulnerable in our connection and desires, and sharing that with other folks. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take a very specific aspect of consent. So who owns your health? Owns in the sense of who experiences your health, who suffers from lack of health, who pays for whatever is done related to your health? Any answers? Yeah, it's actually you, and yet, do you really have the opportunity to give consent about a lot of things that are done in the name of health, which are actually nothing to do with health? Who benefits when you lack health? Who makes money when you get sick? Yeah, the three main groups: insurance companies, members of the medical professional, and the pharmaceutical companies, especially big pharma. Think about our health service. Oh, also the people who make money are the ones who actually have the power about what's done, and you don't always get the opportunity to give consent or withhold it. Does our health service have anything to do with health? We'll get back to that. But the health service pays for medical and surgical professionals and for pharmaceutical companies to fix problems using medical and surgical approaches, not using health approaches, but medical and surgical approaches. Who pays to keep us healthy? We do. So in the sense of making good connections, having clean water, good food, somewhere to live, generally, we pay for those things. We are paying for our own health on top of paying taxes, which pay for the medical services. Do we actually, have we consented to that arrangement? Not exactly. We'll come back to more later. That's enough for me.
So this is very similar to what Tanille said, which is accountability, education, and awareness. We need to start with our own circles of influence. That starts with ourselves, our family members, our friends, our social circles. If we educate ourselves and others about the realities of sexual harassment, abuse, sexual violence, being able to recognize it in ourselves when we lack awareness of somebody else's non-consent, when we make assumptions about Others consent in social circumstances and situations. I'll give a very personal example. As a Muslim woman, I observe certain personal and spiritual, I don't want to say regulations or restrictions, but a mode of conduct. So for example, I don't have physical contact with members of the opposite gender unless very explicitly expressed in certain circumstances. And yet it is always assumed that when a man puts his hand out to shake his hand, I will do so. And every time that I respectfully say no, they are shocked that this is even an option. And that is how ingrained the idea of access to any part of somebody's body is in our society. Especially between members of the opposite gender, and especially with regards to women's behavior with regards to men. It is expected that we respond to a handshake or a hug, and for us to pull away or to respectfully decline it's shattering to some people, shockingly. And so just having an awareness of that is so important, and it starts so young. Being able to teach your child, your toddler, that they don't have to give somebody a hug or a kiss. Empowering your toddler to say no if they're not comfortable with physical contact. Because when we hear about so many stories of child sexual abuse, it's because there is an expectation that an adult can demand access to a younger person's body, and they don't have the right to say no. And so it starts from that young age. And it, like I said, as we ourselves grow older, educating ourselves and being aware of the social context that we're in and the unspoken social norms, and being willing to object, respectfully or otherwise. I have had men who demand to see my face, and they have no right to, and they are incensed that I will not give them access to that part of my body just because they feel entitled to it. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I could go on and on and on.
I think the next question drills down on that a little bit, because we're talking about consent, and this is, how can bystanders, that's us, interrupt verbal and physical harassment of women, especially women of color and visible minorities such as Muslim women? You can start?
Yes, I'll definitely start with this one. So the first thing is, don't be silent. Silence is what enables and empowers verbal and physical violence. In all my experiences of being targeted as a visibly Muslim woman of color, it's the silence of bystanders that really cause me the most heartache and disappointment. I don't expect anyone to tackle somebody else when somebody is verbally harassing me or, acting kind of funky around me, but it does make a world of a difference if somebody stands up and says, this is not okay. Or if they're not comfortable addressing the harasser themselves, just coming to me and expressing sympathy and support and encouragement, just letting me know that I'm not alone. Now personally, I'm a tough cookie, but I know that a lot of my friends, a lot of my acquaintances, other Muslim women, especially those who may not be fluent in English, those who do come from other countries, who are immigrants, who are refugees, who are not comfortable and not familiar with this environment, when they are verbally or physically harassed and attacked in the streets or on the bus or at school, they don't necessarily have the tools to defend themselves. And for them to see that everybody who is observing this act of violence is just going to stand there and be silent, it sends the message that this is okay, this is acceptable, and that yes, somebody can attack us for the way that we look, or the way that we're dressed, or the color of our skin, or our different language. And that it really, like I said, makes a world of a difference. And when somebody else does step up and does interrupt this act of harassment and violence, that sends an even stronger message to the harasser that this behavior is not only not tolerated, but will be recognized for what it is, but it will be stopped. Those who abuse are cowards. Whether it's verbal abuse or physical abuse, they are cowards, and they get off on being able to enact their acts of violence without being interrupted. So the main thing is, don't be silent.
I can sometimes be a little bit outspoken, but the last time I saw something like this happen, the guy was a huge, great guy, and I just went up to him and said, "Don't be such an ignorant idiot." And he looked very startled and went away. Wasn't very tactful, but it worked.
That's what we need. That's really all it takes.
One thing that I've been learning in my new roles, well, this has been in the past year, I try and make safer spaces. I don't believe that there's a safe space, what some of our panelists were talking about earlier, but trying to create a safer space, being really in tune to being in social capital, you know, so I know I'm a community leader, and so I have certain social capital, so when people are coming to an event I'm at, welcoming them, making a connection. And there's also like, you know, an expectation like, oh, you want to be in connection, because most people do. And so when there's something going on that might look like it's escalating violence, whether it's me or someone else closer to that person, I can check in with them. And so it really depends. Like I check in with the person that's possibly being harmed. And say, hey, how are you? Do you need support? How can I support you? One teenage girl that I was trying to check in on at this a grad party that was happening this past couple months ago, and I could see that he was being physically and verbally abusive, and they were boyfriend and girlfriend at this party, and I just said, hey, how are you? And she's like, oh, I'm good, I got this. And I was like, all right, it's all you. You know, so really just trying to check in and say, hey, I see you, I'm here for you, and how can I support? And then working with the people that maybe are the people that are doing the harm, I always bring in some sort of curiosity, being like, how's your night going? What do you need? So it kind of clocks them, say, oh, I am being noticed, I am seen. And depending on how that goes, I can give people feedback on their behavior, because I find that, well, depending on the situation and the person, sometimes people are ignorant and they don't know that they are being harmful at times. So giving them the feedback is sometimes really helpful in those situations. Again, depending on people's safety and how people are responding to that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would echo pretty much what the other women on the panel have said. I think as bystanders, we just really need to recognize that we can make a difference and to have the courage to step in some form or manner. And I'm all about kind of positive energies, and so to do that with kindness and compassion and love, and even to the offender who obviously is doing something that is very hurtful and harmful and not something we want to promote, but to step in with kindness and to invite that person to bring respect into the equation, so that invite them to see the other person in a respectful manner, and that the person who has been harmed is a valued member of our society. And then also, as Zainab said, to also give attention to the woman who has been affected, so that she feels supported and knows that there's a community of support around her as well, that she's not alone, and that the actions of the offending party are not those felt by everybody else, that it's not reflective of the community around her.
Great. So we got 2 of the letters of HERS today, so that was on the safety part of it, and we're going to shift over to the health part now. I wonder if we want to combine the last 2 questions. That'd give you more time to respond, I think, is out of this. So I'm going to go through both questions and then see how this goes. So I think the more general question is, how can we support women to realize that their health matters and that by taking positive action on their health, they can not only feel better in their own body and mind, but also better equipped to support their loved ones and community. So how can we support women to understand that this is a priority in their lives? The second question, I think, drills down on it. It's like, okay, so what are you going to do to shift the focus from costly medical and surgical fixes to a proactive focus by us and by our government on the less expensive and more effective support of wellness?
We can just, I don't like, what's it called? Yeah, linear stuff. I'm like, this is, oh, okay, we can do this. Sorry.
So I'm going to start with the first question and move on to the second question. I believe it's so important for all of us to recognize and realize that our health does matter, and that that supporting our own mental, physical, and emotional health inevitably also supports the health of those around us. So often I see women who are stressed out and doing so much for their family and everybody else around them that they're neglecting their own health. And as a result, they end up frazzled and just burnt out and totally drained of energy because they're not replenishing their own mental, physical, and emotional health. And so this is one thing that I really advocate for, is for women to take control of their health and to take steps to support their own health. And realize that taking care of their own health is not a selfish act, but it's actually an act of love for themselves and also for those around them, because in doing so, it enables them to be the best version of themselves and then have more energy and have more compassion and have more vitality to give to those around them. So I'm really passionate about realizing that our personal health is important. And then in terms of my own actions, in terms of supporting health and wellness, this is really kind of like the passion of my being, of my work, is to promote a health and wellness approach to life, so that we're not just focused on the disease and at that point, sickness when we get there, but really starting earlier and recognizing and taking actions to promote our own health and wellness from early on. And I do this by advocating for health and wellness, and then also providing information and resources about how to live a healthy lifestyle, both how to eat a nutritionally dense diet, how to incorporate movement in a way that's pleasurable and fun, how to de-stress and release stress from our lives, how to live an energized life, so that we promote and we live a healthy lifestyle because we enjoy doing it, because we realize the health benefits from it, and it's not something that we feel like we have to do or we should do. Because when we get into those have-tos and shoulds, then it becomes like a burden, and it's not the way to actually develop healthy habits, because eventually you'll break under that pressure of having to or should do. So it's about learning how to really realize and love a healthy lifestyle, and helping all of us to do that, also from a community approach, working with especially local governments to promote and enable a healthy community, for instance, promoting active transportation, and also access to healthy food and to mental health services as well.
I want to answer this in like more of a vulnerable way. That's like what I do in a lot of my workshops. Is I always start out with like a vulnerable story so that it invites and welcomes people to be who they are. And when I was reading these questions and reflecting this week on that, it's just been like, oh, health and wellness. When I was really young, health and wellness meant getting a job full-time 13 years old, right? To take care of myself and my family. And then I just have never updated that. Like, I'm always working like 40 to 90 hours a week. And I continually burn out every 6 months. And I just went through a burnout about 2 weeks ago where I couldn't walk for about 5 days. And so, yeah, it's like really interesting because I think that I'm so attached to what used to be on how I care for myself. It's not necessarily relevant anymore. And I need to learn and grow and accept that maybe health and understanding myself is not being like obsessed with work and taking care of myself in other ways. So for example, last week, I had a friend coming into town to visit me at 7 o'clock, and I literally was like, I'm gonna be in bed till 5. Like that is like, because I hadn't, like from February 1st to end of June, I had only 3 days off. And so I was like, I'm gonna be in bed till 5, and I'm going to sleep, and I'm going to connect with myself, and maybe talk to a friend on the phone, and taking moments of, reflection and care. And then just from like the medical, what we were talking about, one of the other questions around the medical and surgical ways of dealing with health, it's been very confusing the past 3 years of my chronic severity around burnouts and trauma. And so when I am in severe pain, I will go to emergency, and they're like, there's nothing wrong with you, medically. And they're like, we can see you're in pain, here's some painkillers, but we don't know how to support you. And so that's been really like an understanding of like, okay, so I need to look for many different ways on how to connect with my mind, body, and heart and spirit so that I'm not in crippling pain. And that's been a journey, and I hope to like continually listen to my body and be in connection with myself so that I can advocate and ask and treat myself better so I can serve my communities better. Yeah, thank you.
The fact that we're asking this question now doesn't mean it's the first time it's been asked. In fact, if you look up on the, I guess it's up there. Is it? Oh. The World Health Organization is an excellent part of the United Nations, and I have a really good friend there, and I said to him ages ago, you know, what are the priorities for health? By far the most important factor in your health is your social connections, and that was said earlier. There are millions of people in the world who never see a doctor, a nurse, etc., and who are thoroughly healthy. In fact, there's a fairly famous woman in Ireland who's now 101, and she had to go to have an injection, one of them needles, she said, when there was a flu epidemic. But she doesn't think she'll have to go to the doctor again. So that's probably about 80 or 90 years without visiting the doctor. She still does her own laundry, her own gardening, and walks to the shops. So the biggest thing is your social connections, and if you aren't good with people, dogs are almost as good. Partly because a dog will know that you're right, will think that you're perfect. Cats aren't quite as good because they know that you're not perfect. But any kind of a living thing, even a plant, helps. So I'm going to the doctor, going to ER, yes, there are times for that, but really just friends. Or other social connections, maybe people you've never met, talk to somebody on the bus. Then the next thing that's really important, and for all the First Nations sisters in this room, clean water is so high on this list, and it is a national crime that we don't provide clean water in every community. And then nutritious food. Really important. If you don't have enough to eat and the right stuff, you're not going to be healthy. And safe housing. And it's not just having it today, it's knowing that you're going to have those things into the foreseeable future. So we're back to the poverty discussion. It's all linked together. It's really important to know stuff. Education doesn't mean literacy. It might mean knowing how to catch fish, knowing how to grow something, knowing how to build a house. But having knowledge is really important. And anyone who has access to traditional knowledge, please do everything you can to make sure that it's not lost. So much has been lost. And I mentioned, I think a few times, I'm Irish. The Irish language almost disappeared. It's back. Although I have to say that on one occasion I was speaking Irish with a friend in Vancouver, People beside us on the bus turned around and said, talk white. Right. Okay, I happen to be pink with blue eyes and red hair, but never mind, talk white. Okay, sure. Which just made us louder, of course. Not very long ago, the Co-op Housing Federation of Canada had its annual meeting here, and they asked us, the Victoria Health Co-op, to put together something about non-opioid approaches to the treatment of pain. We decided not to use the phrase non-opioid because it's bigger than that, but you have a little flyer in front of you that talks about non-pharmaceutical approaches to the prevention and treatment of pain. I hope you'll take those, take a couple, share them. My name's on the back. If you think I've said anything really stupid, don't hesitate to contact me. So that's all about health. Right towards the bottom of the list, and it's actually number 7 on the World Health Organization list, is medical services. If you want to irritate any doctor, that's a little fact you can use. All the other things are more important, starting with your social connections. So my big thing is, how do we get public attention and government investment away from building more clinics, trying to hire more doctors, of which there aren't any at any rate, and onto looking at health, promoting clean water, social connections, safe housing, which actually means that we need more social work and nursing services and more housing. I could go on forever. Oh, by the way, we've got a new project starting with a nurse and we need a researcher. We also need a treasurer. Anyone out there? Okay, thank you.
I completely agree with everything Vanessa said because it is so true. Holistic wellness is so important, and again, it's the education and the awareness that makes a world of difference. But we also need incentives to make it feasible to live healthy and to live well, to pursue a lifestyle of holistic wellness, starting with diet. It costs more to eat a vegetable or a fruit every day than to eat an entire meal of processed junk. And this is what I discovered when, after living overseas for some time in what we would term third world countries, but which had fresh fruits and vegetables every day. I kid you not, when I was living in Egypt, there was a tiny little grocery cart, fruits and vegetables, that were brought in fresh from the farms. Every day I watched the donkey bring them in. And it was so easy for me to eat well, to eat fruits and vegetables that were in season, and it cost a lot more to seek out junk food. And that changed my diet in drastic ways, and it was amazing. And when I moved back to Canada, and I was grocery shopping for myself and my then 5-6-year-old daughter, I realized it cost me almost half my food budget to be able to provide her with fresh fruits and vegetables and simple proteins than it did to buy Katie mac and cheese and frozen pizzas and chicken nuggets. And I was in a position where I was on a very tight budget, and I had to make decisions for myself and my daughter about whether I wanted her to be properly full at the end of every day and feel fully satisfied and not hungry, or do I give her good food but there's a lot less of it. And thankfully I'm no longer in that position, but that experience stays with me every single time I go grocery shopping. And I compare prices and I think, what do I want for my daughter today and tomorrow and for the next year and for the rest of her life? What message do I want to give her? What do I want for her body and her wellness? So that's number one. Then there's issues of fitness. To put my daughter in karate means that I have to pick up as many extra shifts as possible. And there are so many other ways to pursue fitness outside of certain programs, but when you are a single mom, and this all comes back, it's all part of a cycle of poverty and economic situation and all of that. But you need to have all these things in mind, and you need to make these hard decisions. And so it's not always possible to afford to keep yourself healthy and well, and more importantly, your child healthy and well. So there's that. Natural medicine, access to naturopaths. Again, it's going to cost a lot more out of pocket to have the option of considering natural options and alternatives to pharmaceutical medications. I'm personally going through health issues of my own. I've consulted the medical services, I've had blood tests taken, and I've been told there's nothing really wrong with you, but I know that my body isn't working the way that it should. And for me to go and seek out a naturopath and somebody who will work with me holistically is financially not feasible, and I don't know when it ever will be. And so it's all part and parcel of the bigger picture of these cycles. And not having incentives and the ability to have those options has a deep and lasting impact on your day-to-day life and your long-term living as well. And as to the second question about what we can do for women in general to be more comfortable and aware of their bodies, we need to learn. We need to learn about ourselves, and we need to trust in ourselves and know our bodies, and we need to talk about it. I've had the amazing, incredible experience of having communities of women that are not afraid to talk about the awkward things and the uncomfortable things, and even the painful things to do with our female bodies. And because I've had that support and that feminine, gyne-effective encouragement and the willingness to be able to talk about these things, even when the rest of society considers it taboo or gross or weird, whether it has to do with menstruation or childbirth or everything outside of that. That makes a world of difference, and that created a confidence in me to believe in my body, to trust in my body, and to be able to trust other women when they speak about their bodies. And so when we do go to a doctor and a doctor says, there's nothing wrong with you, we can still confidently say, no, I know my body, and this is not how it is supposed to be. And we need to have that confidence and that strength to advocate for ourselves and to demand better health and better wellness and better medical services that listen to us and listen to our bodies as well.
I want to thank the panelists, and maybe just take a second and try to pull the threads together here for the afternoon, just a minute. So, as we heard, we kind of finished up with health, with this interesting aspect. So in British Columbia, we have a $42 billion a year provincial budget. $22 billion goes to health, right? That's what we spend. So how, and I think Sarah said it earlier, is like, you know, somebody's deciding how that money gets spent, right? So our ability to take control of how that expenditure is occurring in the next period of time is probably the one highest leverage activities we can focus on, right? And one of my experience of working with the new provincial government in the last 6 months or something, I mean, 6 months ago, the government is a bureaucracy, they stay there, they keep turning it over, and then there's the political appointees that come in and then try to change it, tell it to do different things, right? So what's happened is the bureaucracy keeps going, and in the last 6 months, there's like a whole new raft of people running the government now. They're typically 30-something women, I have to tell you, in my experience, which I think is a good indicator, right? So I think all the things we heard today is like, get up, do something, speak up, show up, and make it happen, right? And we can change things.